Samus Aran had explored some of the darkest and most sinister places in the universe. Caverns where light is as faint as the screeches in the distance, organic hives where creatures hide in shadow. She'd been to places that haunt you with eerie tranquility, as well as otherworldly nightmares. Samus had seen it all, and yet she'd never seen anything like this. This is Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, and in a series known for its atmosphere and mood, this arguably captures Metroid at its darkest and most unsettling. Six months have passed since Samus Aran destroyed the Metroid Prime. She receives word that a squad of 40 Space Marines with the Galactic Federation has gone missing after pursuing a space pirate frigate, and their last known location was the planet Ether. Of course, given her personal history, Samus is compelled to search for the squad, the 40 men who were once her comrades. Without hesitation, Samus sets course for the planet, but when she arrives on Ether, she finds an unnerving scene unlike any she'd encountered before. Like the first Metroid Prime, the opening sequence of Echoes immediately sets the tone for the game. See, Samus always finds herself on strange planets. That's really nothing new, but this time she wasn't supposed to be alone. This time she was supposed to be on a rescue mission of sorts, but as she discovers, she's too late. Beyond the obvious horror of bodies dangling from the ceiling, something's not right, not for Samus and not for you. Despite all the things she uncovers in her adventures, Samus rarely finds signs of humanity, at least not until she visited Ether. The Marines, these people who she once worked with, lie scattered around her in cold, lifeless heaps. This was one of the first times Samus encountered her own kind in-game in Metroid, a significant enough moment even without the state we find them in. And of course it's totally fitting, the rare moment she encounters humanity, it's a grisly reminder of her own mortality. How freaking Metroid is that? Again, the coolness aside, this sequence firmly establishes what's in store for Samus on Ether. A dark and unsettling experience, even by Metroid standards, not to mention a game that tries to fill the massive space boots left by its predecessor by not filling them at all. Rather, Echoes tries to be its own unique Metroid, and in that regard, it's a stirring success. Like the original Prime, Echoes belongs to a genre all its own. It may take place from a first-person perspective and include lots of shooting, but Echoes is not at all a first-person shooter. This is a first-person adventure, a game in which combat certainly makes up part of the experience, but pales in comparison to the game's real focus, lots and lots of exploration. If you've never played a Metroid game, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by Echoes. The game drops you on a massive alien world in the middle of an existential crisis and simply says, go. It doesn't tell you a story, it doesn't explain what's going on Ether. Uncovering all that is completely up to you, as is figuring out where to go, what to do, and what's trying to kill you. In short, that is Metroid, and combat does play a part in that, but it's never a focus. Ether is the focus, and exploring the planet's surreal locations is what Echoes is all about. Of course, that's also what Prime was all about, so what does Echoes do so differently? Well, aside from the darker tone and story, it also uses a classic Nintendo convention, the idea of coexisting worlds of light and dark. See, Ether's been split into two parallel worlds, Light Ether and Dark Ether. You have to consistently explore both worlds to progress through the game, not to mention solve some cross-dimensional puzzles. You might have to activate a control panel in Dark Ether that lowers a bridge in Light Ether, for example, and those puzzles are as satisfying and plentiful as they are challenging. But the most interesting aspect of the light and dark dimensions is that they feel so similar, yet so incredibly different. You're traveling the same planet, so in both worlds, levels have the same general structure, but just about everything else is different. The stunning art style characteristic of the designers at Retro Studios defines Light Ether, but Dark Ether has a completely different vibe, and it can often instill a real feeling of dread. In fact, the mood changes almost instantly when you realize you have to step into that foreboding world of shadow. The enemies are different, the weapons are different, the mood is different. These aren't just the same levels with different color schemes. They really feel like worlds that are about to rip apart from one another, and that's an awesome design achievement. And ultimately, it's that dynamic that defines Echoes. As is often the price of such ambitious design, however, there are a few things about Echoes that may turn some players away. For starters, it's a much slower and more methodical game than Prime, which is sort of a byproduct of the game's increased difficulty level. Ether is a much more difficult planet to explore than Talon 4, and Echoes is a much more challenging game than Prime. Obviously, die-hard fans will appreciate those changes, but there's obviously a sizable portion of gamers who are going to find Echoes a bit too much to chew. In a way, it's unfair that a game this good would have to follow a game like Metroid Prime. The original is considered one of Nintendo's greatest modern achievements, and that kind of leaves Echoes in its own sort of shadow world, constantly compared and often unfavorably to its exalted predecessor. But you know, in the same way Majora's Mask offered a darker and smarter Zelda than the more traditional and revered Ocarina of Time, this game does exactly the same thing for Metroid Prime. This is a daring sequel that tries to be different, and for that alone it deserves credit. Of course, it also happens to be brilliant. One of the most unique, challenging, and eerie adventures she's ever taken, Samus Aran is at her best in Metroid Prime 2: Echoes.